Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining to this seminar. I'm Carla Barlagne. I'm an agricultural economist working at the INRAE, the French National Research Institution for Research in Agronomy and the Environment. And I am a research associate at the James Hutton Institute in Scotland. And the work I'm presenting today is actually has actually been done and is ongoing with the James Hutton Institute and other partners from a European project we've been working on, which is called the Foodland Project. So I'm here also on the behalf of my co-authors from the James Hutton Institute, Copenhagen Business School, Agricultural School of Meknes in Morocco, Isham in Tunisia, and the University of Bologna in Italy. So the work I'm going to introduce you to today is about integrating experimental and biometric methods to improve the understanding of consumer decision making. And here we implemented a novel protocol. We mixed different approaches together and applied it to the case of olive oil and health information in Tunisia and Morocco. So just the background about the project. So Foodland is a Horizon 2020 project about food security, nutrition, agriculture in Africa, and it's conducted, which will run until February 2025. And the idea of this project is to develop, implement and validate innovative, scalable and sustainable technologies aimed at supporting the nutrition performances of local food systems in Africa, while strengthening agrobiodiversity and food diversity, as well as diversity in healthy diet. So it's a big consortium. We have 14 food hubs in 6 African countries, and there are a range of, of course, work packages. And I'll invite you to log on to the website to see the range of activities that are developed within that project. But the work I'm going to introduce you today sits within the work package 2. That is focused on consumers' food preferences and behaviors. And the idea of this work package is to develop and implement open organizational innovation for local supply chains. So as a background to this research, we are looking into consumer decision making and want to basically to understand better what drives the consumer to make their choices. And we know now that, and we have known for a long time, that consumers' decisions are driven by more than just rationality. So we use rationality and utility maximization quite classically in economics, but we now know, and we have known that there are a lot more to rationality when it comes to making decisions. And factors, whether conscious or unconscious factors, are also involved and drive preferences. So in our case, conscious factors such as values preference can be approached through the product's attributes or the characteristics. So like when you choose a food product, you look at the nutritional content, etc., or the origin, and this can be communicated to the consumers via visual cues that you usually found on labels or on packaging. And then you have other unconscious factors, such as, let's say, emotions or, your state of hunger at the moment you go to the supermarket, that drive things like that, and that drives preferences, and that can be recorded through emotions using eye tracking technology and facial expressions. We also know that, in general, consumers prefer healthier products, and then there's a lot of advertisement around the nutritional quality of products. But sometimes knowing that a product is healthy is contradicted or doesn't necessarily go along with how the product tastes when you have it in your mouth. And that's exactly the case of olive oil, which tend to be where olive oil, bitter and pungent olive oil, tend to be healthier because of their antioxidant content, but they tend to be disliked by consumers in the global north, where we have like softer and sweeter olive oil. So that all of this makes highlight the fact that it's important to inform consumers about the nutritional value, and in order to help them make better and informed food choices. So as a sort of the conceptual model that we have adopted in this research, we are, in order to be able to measure consumers' preferences, we use a variable that we call willingness to pay, which is the maximum amount of money people would be really ready to pay for a unit of that product, whether it's a bottle of olive oil or a basket of biscuits. And then we derived the following conceptual model. So for us, the quality cues that are available to the consumers drive information and information that you provide to them, direct or drive their attention, then their perception about the value of that product, and then they evaluate it. And that is leads to the willingness to pay for that product, which is the variable that we are interested in measuring. And so based on that model, we developed a novel protocol that integrates, so reveal preferences, which are basically, we set up a laboratory experiment where we elicit directly preferences from the consumers and the measurement of the biometric data. So in order with eye tracking, in order to measure those unconscious factors that can be also revealed, but through facial expressions and measurements of the fixation, where the eye fixate on the product and for how long. And we test the protocol empirically on extra virgin olive oil in 2 countries. And the goal of the idea is to understand better how the provision of information about health and nutrition impacts consumer choices. And this is relevant when there is a mismatch between preferred sensory characteristics and health benefits, like for olive oil, as I said earlier, bitter and pungent olive oil tend to be disliked by consumers in the global north. Improving, we want to improve understanding of the role of unconscious factors into decision-making processes, in order to, when we keep in the economic literature, we keep trying to understand and make those models predict better consumer behavior by incorporating other aspects. And the idea is to derive policy recommendations and also contribute to methodological development with this protocol. So we've got, we have a range of research hypotheses. There are quite a few, so I'll drive you through them. But they're aligned to the 2 basically contributions we wanted to make. So one on the policy side of it and one on the theoretical, methodological part of it. So basically, that's been a big experiment, and we are like, this is actually like there are two studies within what I'm going to introduce to you today. But basically, the first hypothesis from an empirical point of view, the baseline hypothesis based on the literature is that consumers dislike pungent or bitter olive oil, and therefore they have a lower willingness to pay for that olive oil before they know anything about the polyphenol content or they have any information about their health benefits. Then we, and our hypothesis follow the protocols that I'm going to introduce in the next slides. Hypothesis 2 is that when you inform people about the characteristic of the product, so in that case the origin, but also the polyphenol content, then you impact the willingness to pay. So based again on the literature, consumers tend to favor products that are from the local place where they live, from a local origin. And here we introduce just the polyphenol content without providing information, just saying this is the amount of polyphenol, or this olive oil has a high polyphenol content. And the hypothesis is that without necessarily having more information about what polyphenol content mean, we make the hypothesis that this doesn't impact consumers' willingness to pay for olive oil. And then in stage 3, when we provide additional textual information about the relationship between polyphenol content and the taste of olive oil and the health benefits, basically telling people, well, this olive oil has a strong taste, but it means that it's healthier for your health, then we expect consumers to be actually ready to pay more for this polyphenol content. And then we assume that when actually people have all of the information together, so that they have the information about the polyphenol content, but they are actually able to taste the olive oil, the bitter taste comes back into the evaluation process, and then we suspect that it will decrease a little bit their evaluation of that olive oil. But there's still a higher preference for high polyphenol oil. So this is for the data, the evaluation of the product in itself, and then the policy recommendation that we can derive from them. And then I told you about the second aspect that we wanted to develop, which was, or to contribute to, which was, yielding or building, contributing to the methodological, to the methodology in order to measure better preferences. We think that, so we hypothesize that including biometric measurements actually improve the specifications of the models. And that, so among those measurements, we have things like emotions and lower attention or fixation time on the product relate to lower willingness to pay. And the opposite is true. So positive emotions lead to higher willingness to pay. Higher attention on fixation time are related to higher willingness to pay. And I'm conscious that's a lot to take in, but yeah, please.
Can I just ask a question to the earlier slide? It was a very quick one.
Of course, yeah.
Did you let people taste the olive oil? Was it just the olive oil pure, like on a spoon, or was it in a salad or a preparation?
So I will come to that, but yeah, we used just plain bread without a very blend, yeah. So we developed, so we adopted an economic laboratory experiment. As I said, we are trying to combine methods together. So we used a laboratory experiment that has been validated in the literature, where we introduce people to food products, and we measure their willingness to pay at each stage of the protocol, and we combine it with eye tracking. So in the economic experiment protocol, we have several stages, and we release information to the consumers little by little, and every time we measure the willingness to pay, and we are directly able to measure whether that additional bit of information actually impact the willingness to pay. And it's what we call an auction-based mechanism, which is basically a way to make sure that people reveal their preferences that are as close as possible to their true preferences in the real world. So people are entitled with some stipend for their fee, for their participation. They are entitled to some money, and then they have to bid in some of that money to buy the product at the end. So this is a mechanism that basically ensures that people, do not give prices just to please the research team, but they actually are close to their real preferences. And then we include eye tracking and facial measurement expressions. So eye tracking are basically where you look at on the product and how many times you fix the product. So those two measures are fixation counts and fixation duration. And then we measure facial expression that will lead to understanding whether people have positive emotions, negative emotions, or neutral emotions during the process. We analyzed 4 different types of extra virgin oil for Morocco and Tunisia, and that was done with the partner in University of Bologna, and we analyzed them for their pungency and polyphenol content. And then I said earlier that we released an information about the nutritional value of the product, and we tried to make a statement that was simple enough for a lay person to understand it, and that didn't sound very complicated with very technical terms in it. And so we did a pre-test in Copenhagen and pilots and data connection in Morocco and Tunisia in 2022. So this is how we prepared for the experiment. So we've trained facilitators and enumerators on the field. So it's quite those are quite heavy protocols where you need a lot of people to make sure that all the products are ready and presented at the consumers at the same time, and that basically, you know, each consumer is exactly in the same experimental condition than the others. So we had the olive oils in 4 different little plates, and the people were tasting them using bread, but very bland, so that not as to affect the taste of olive oil. And then the consumers would sit in front of a computer on which they had the eye tracking device. So this is a little camera at the top of the computer, and that measures everything. So they were basically asked to try the test and taste the olive oil at each stage while looking at the eye tracking as well, and then to indicate their willingness to pay. And so those are the teams that implemented the data collection in the ground. So that was a bit also, like, the whole process was at the beginning a bit complicated with COVID, so we had to push back, and that's why data collection happened a bit later in 2022. So those are the different stages of the protocol. So we have here step 1. Consumers do not see the bottle on the screen. They just taste and evaluate the oil in turn. And this is in order to construct the baseline from which we are going to actually measure willingness to pay at each stage and then compare it to that baseline. And then in stage 2, we introduce the bottles. Consumers see them on the screen, and they have information about the origin, whether it's a local or a national oil, and polyphenol content, which is indicated as high and low. And actually, consumers are not able to make the link between what they tried at the one stage and the following stage, because it's all randomized. And here, the bottles are not linked to the oil tested at stage 1. So that's ensure independence between the stages. Then in stage 3, we introduce the information. Then consumers see the following text on the screen. A pungent or bitter taste of olive oil indicates a higher content of polyphenol. Olive oil polyphenols are good for your health. Therefore, healthier olive oils are likely to be bitterer and more pungent. And then they see the bottles with the information about the origin and the polyphenol content, and they are asked to evaluate the bottles again. Then in stage 4, they see the bottle, so we reintroduce the bottle, but this time they are again able to taste. So they have all the information together, the origin, the polyphenol content, the information about health, and the taste. So they are able to, they have all those factors to make their evaluation. And then, and the stage 1, which was not included in the analysis, but which was of interest for our colleagues doing market research, we introduced the real bottles on the screen. So the bottles as they appear on the local markets, to see if there was any effect of the packaging on consumers' preferences as well. So we tested, as I said earlier, 4 types of olive oil both in Tunisia and Morocco. And we had basically 2 origins for every time, national versus local, and 2 polyphenol content, low and high. So we have a very balanced plan of experiment. So we have the 4, basically all the combinations between those 2 characteristics, origin and polyphenol content. I'll pass you the detail, but basically the oils were carefully selected by an official committee and evaluated for their polyphenol content, high and low, to make sure that we had products that were actually very different from one another and suitable for the experiment. We implemented the protocols in 2 cities, Meknes in Morocco and Sousse in Tunisia. Both cities are located in olive oil producing region. And of course, because it involves tasting, you have to be very careful that no one has allergy to the products that you're asking them to taste. And each session lasted 30 minutes. And we had 2 eye trackers, so we could run 2 sessions in parallel. Is that...
maybe somebody in the... Sorry.
So we recorded the data on software, eye motion software, and we included 17 biometric measures, out of which 15 emotions, based on face response and 2 fixation metrics. So we had gathered this data for each olive oil and for each stage. So this is the empirical model, the econometric model. So I don't know how, I won't go into details about it, but basically the willingness to pay is the measure, the variable that we want to explain. And we explain it according to the characteristics of the olive oil, the origin of those olive oils, their polyphenol content, the stage of the protocol at which we, whether what type of information was present, and controls. So, such as social demographics, but also the type of which computer people were using, and we estimated the model for Tunisia and Morocco. So we included biometric measures, so the emotions, single emotions, but also classes of emotion: positive, negative, and neutral. And we also included fixation time and duration as explanatory variable. And then we introduced those biometric measures in the model and interacted them with the parameters of the model. And we use a random effect two-bit model, which is a type of model that we use with this sort of protocol where you have the data is censored to the left. So in this case, consumers could not give prices that were negative. So two-bit models are quite efficient with this type of data. And we used performance indicators such as the Bayesian information criteria and AKK information criteria to judge of the model, to assess the model performance. So the lower those indicators, the better the model. So we had a sample of 230 consumers in Morocco, 208 in Tunisia, at an average age of 45 in Morocco, 42 in Tunisia. 48% of the consumers were female in Morocco, 53% in Tunisia. Well, so that's lots of detail, but coming then, so this is about the sample, the characteristics of the sample. And then when we come to the appreciation of the olive oil, so they have a similar, so we ask consumers what were the criteria that were important for them when they would buy olive oil. And we have a similar ranking of those factors in both countries. So first is the taste, and then the trust in producer, the color, price, and then a range of other different factors. And in Morocco, it's quite similar as well. So in terms of how people evaluate or what olive oils are best or are best preferred or are better evaluated at each stage. So we have Volubilia in Morocco, and Volubilia was this olive oil that is locally produced in Morocco and the one with a high polyphenol content. And here in Tunisia, we have Newman's Own. So it's the local and high polyphenol content oil that wins at all the stages, and until the stage 4 where people taste, have all the information. And then just when we introduce the bottle at the final stage, it's another olive oil, the one with a low polyphenol content that wins. So here we assume that basically people recognize, maybe are more sensitive to how the product look in the market. So basically, to summarize, there's a significantly higher willingness to pay for pungent and bitter olive oil in both countries. And there's no difference when it comes to the origin. So this is those are the results of the model, but and then I'll drive you through the hypothesis. So our first hypothesis was basically that consumers do not really like pungent olive oil based on the literature in the global north. And actually this hypothesis was not verified because actually in this case, in Morocco and Tunisia, they did prefer the more pungent olive oil. So we were like, oh, okay, interesting. When it comes to the local versus national olive oil, so the local origin did not attract higher willingness to pay. So we think, and then that was confirmed in a different sort of different protocol used by Met and R. And what we think here is that maybe the differentiation between local and national wasn't as relevant in that case, and maybe national versus imported olive oil would have yielded a more differentiation in terms of willingness to pay. So in next, we said that when we introduce a label about polyphenol content, we thought that it wouldn't affect people's willingness to pay. We thought that people wouldn't necessarily know about just what polyphenol meant. And actually, it wasn't verified. So basically, people, when we introduced just polyphenol, the information about high or low content of polyphenol, people already started to evaluate better the olive oil. So it means that there is some knowledge here already, without giving the explanation, that people are quite familiar already with the notion of polyphenol content, and it increased their willingness to pay. Next, hypothesis 3 was when you provide people with information that it increases their willingness to pay, and the hypothesis was verified. So actually, it did have an impact. And then H4 was, hypothesis 4 was that when you give people, when you reintroduce the taste, even if it's bitter people would still value the oils with a stronger polyphenol content and therefore a stronger pungent taste. So that was verified. So in terms of this first empirical part, how does health information impact consumers' willingness to pay for olive oil? So indeed, health-related information increased their consumers' willingness to pay for healthier olive oil. There was a limited awareness of what constituted good oil in theoretical or nutritional terms. So when we talked about, so that's something I didn't mention, but we also asked people about what they thought extra virgin olive oil meant. And we see that there is still potential to increase consumer knowledge about those aspects. But people were overall able to appreciate the quality because when tasting the product, they showed there was a higher willingness to pay for pungent and bitter olive oil. This research has also shown that concise message about the health benefits is effective in driving consumers' preferences. So it actually works in terms of policy implication. There's a solid basis to build upon to advertise novel or healthier food products. So this is the EU health claim. Olive oil polyphenols contribute to the protection of blood lipids from oxidative stress. And here, we can see that it's already quite a complicated, vocabulary for like the everyday person. So it advocates for more concise message. And in our protocol showed localness was not a value added, at least for olive oil and the cities considered, and that trust is a key element for appreciation of olive oil, innovators and NGO to work for and building trust between producers and consumers. So now, I'm conscious about the time, but this is the second part. Those are the last two hypotheses, which were we wanted also to make a methodological contribution and see whether incorporating data into models of consumer choices would actually improve those models. So here are the models for Tunisia. basically what we have are the range of emotions that were measured: anger, sadness, disgust, joy, surprise, fear, etc. Oops, sorry, I did touch the screen. We're still in Tunisia, good. And then aggregated emotion, positive, negative, neutral, and those two additional variables: fixation duration, how long you stare at something, and fixation count. And in yellow, what we have measures of when of the performance indicators compared to the baseline model, basically. So in yellow is where the models perform better than the baseline model. So we see in the case of Tunisia that, for example, fear does, when we include fear, when we look at fear, it improves the performance of the model. In the model with interaction, anger and sadness improve the model, engagement and attention improve the model, and then all the composite emotions also improve the model. And every time we have the fixation duration and fixation count that improve the model. So in some cases, we say that some emotions do improve the model performance. Here is for Morocco, so we have something quite similar with some emotions working in some cases, like here disgust or joy. Here where we have other emotions like or state such as attention, sentimentality, confusion. And again, we have all those composite emotions that work well in model without interactions and model with interaction. So here, what do we have then to summarize? So hypothesis 5 was that by integrating biometric measures into the specification of willingness to pay models, we increase the performance of the model. So this hypothesis is partially verified. So we see that some emotions do increase the performances, but not all of them. So what we saw with this data, that was also quite new for us as economists to work with this data, is that there was a lot of sometimes a lot of emotions that were felt or that could be detected only from a portion of the consumers and not everyone. So we have an interesting data set in the sense that we have to make sure we choose or we aggregate the right sort of emotions. So some biometric variables improve the performance of the model, such as engagement, attention, positive, negative, and neutral, better than other emotions. And fixation duration and fixation count improve the performance of those models all the time. So this is quite stable. And then when it comes to the balance of the emotion, whether they are positive or negative emotion, so our hypothesis is partially verified. So basically, we saw that negative emotion, not all negative emotion derived had an impact on the models or improved the model specifications. And sometimes we actually had signs that were opposite to our hypothesis. For example, anger generated a higher willingness to pay. So we're like, oh wow, why isn't it a negative? But so we have joy, sentimentality, and positive emotion positively related to willingness to pay in at least one model, and anger, sadness, and neutral expression negatively related to willingness to pay in at least one model. And then confusion was positively related to willingness to pay in both Moroccan and Tunisian model. I'm missing a word here. So basically what we can understand from this analysis is that better willingness to pay estimates are derived by accounting for how people are engaged in the research, so how much they look or how much they stare at the screen. And this is in line with the literature. Fixation count and fixation duration are positively related to the willingness to pay. And then, so of course, this is also, as in everything in science, you test new things, so and then you encounter some limitations. So in the case of Tunisia and Morocco, in our protocol we worked with bottles, and actually people there tend to buy olive oil in bulk. So in real life, they might have access to all this type of information that we are able to provide on a label of a bottle. So one would have to think about ways to actually convey that information to consumers. As well, so we introduce more than one piece of information at the same stage. So we introduce origin and the polyphenol content at the same stage. So basically people were evaluating two things at the same time. What we were able to measure is the willingness to pay increase at this stage, rather than for each specific information. And then, so in our data, we see that when we aggregate emotion, it works better. Positive emotion, negative or neutral emotion work better than single emotion. So we still need to, I think probably from an eye tracking perspective, work, the methodology, the technology is evolving. So there are still a lot to do in that field. And as I said earlier, there were some data, there were a lot of zero values because in some cases some emotions were not recorded for all the consumers, but only through some of them. So we wonder whether, in terms of the algorithm behind emotion detection, what are those algorithms and how, are there any, how are they constructed, on which sort of, profiles, and are there also cultural differences in expressing emotions, like some culture are really expressive and will show joy in a specific way, and some other cultures might be more like subtle in the way they express emotions. So to what extent this is captured in eye tracking softwares? That's interesting. So in terms of, so the key messages from these presentations are the following. Informing consumers about the nutritional value of products definitely enables them to make better and informed choice. We have seen that it was reflected in their willingness to pay. The message needs to be simple, clear, and positively framed. Inclusion of biometric variables improve the performance to some extent. We still have work to do and to refine those models, and also the technology as well. And both fields need to improve. So thank you for your attention. So here, just a recognition of the Foodland project and the European Union that funded that project and made it possible. I'm happy to answer any question. Thank you.